Hi, welcome to Tea Time in Olympia. I'm Lucas Miller. My guests today are Alec and Gabbi Clayton, local activists and superheroes.
Not.
They hate it when I call them that. But you guys have been part of the Olympia community for quite some time now.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourselves and your backgrounds. Where do you come from? What do you do?
Well, Gabbi was born in New York City. I was born in Mississippi and grew up there. We met in New York in 1974 and got married the summer after we met and have been together ever since then. Mm-hmm. We moved to Olympia in 1988.
And transferred to Evergreen for my last year of undergraduate school as a way of getting us out of Mississippi after 11 years.
I see. So, Alec, you're an artist, writer, and I just found out former drummer.
Yes.
Ask him what the name of the band was.
Oh boy. What was the name of the band, Alec?
The Southern Playboys.
Oh boy. Okay. Pretty much exactly what they sound like. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Western swing, a little bit of rock and roll.
That was before my time.
Okay. All right. And so, Gabbi, your background, you have a background in film.
I do.
But you currently work in social services.
Well, I sort of have a split personality. I have an undergraduate degree in drawing and painting and film and animation, and then went and got a master's degree in counseling. And so at this point, I have a tiny counseling practice in my home, very tiny, and a half-time job as the office manager of Interfaith Works, which is a local nonprofit. And I also do web design and graphic design and book publishing, starting with Alec's books, but also other people's.
Oh, okay. So you've been involved with the local LGBTQ community for some time. I know you served on the board of PFLAG for quite an extensive period.
10 years.
So tell us a little bit about how that came about. What brought you to be involved?
Okay, well, we had two children, two boys. Our youngest son, Bill, came out as bisexual when he was 14. And we didn't take part in PFLAG at first because we thought PFLAG was just for parents that were struggling with their gay children, and we weren't. But when Bill was 17, he was assaulted in a hate crime on the grounds of Olympia High School. And about a month after that, he committed suicide. So because of that, we got involved with the LGBT community. I was actually invited between the time he was assaulted and the time he committed suicide. I was invited as a guest speaker at PFLAG, and then he committed suicide before the date that I was supposed to speak. So I had to go speak about him right after it happened.
You didn't have to.
Well, I didn't have to. I was willing to. And we were welcomed with open arms to PFLAG, and it felt like family, and they were so supportive that we just kept going to meetings.
And then, as PFLAG does, they recruited us onto the board, but also to do their newsletter and their website, which we've been doing for a long, long time. And I was on the board for most of 15 years, and Alec was the president of the local chapter for 10. So.
Now, so you guys, and I think especially you, Gabbi, you had a role in you were there to see the evolution of PFLAG into a more trans-inclusive organization.
We were sort of on the periphery of that because we weren't connected to the national board, so we didn't know what the discussion was in the early days. We were aware when they finally, the board of the national organization finally made the decision that PFLAG should be trans inclusive. And we know that from friends who were there that it was not all one-sided and totally supportive. There had been a long discussion with some people who were not okay with it or uncomfortable, but they finally did the right thing and said, yeah, we have to do this. Where I was more involved was when ENDA was being
Employment Non-Discrimination.
the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, when they were nationally trying to pass that.
Right.
And there was a decision to leave transgender people out because the politicians don't understand that part yet, so we're going to just do GLB and we'll come back and get Ts later when we can educate them, which we totally thought was something I shouldn't say on television. And a woman who I was working with and friends with had been on the national board as a vice president. I don't think she was at that point. She had stepped back. But she and I were in discussions with the national staff and the national board, and there was a big hullabaloo about, this is not okay. We include transgender people in our mission statement. And at one point I wrote something about when the bombs are going off, you don't lock family members out of the bomb shelter.
Yeah.
And PFLAG did the right thing and not only wouldn't support ENDA, they also passed some kind of resolution saying that PFLAG National will never support any legislation that doesn't include all of the people who we are here because of. So we were really heartened by that and proud to be involved in the leadership. And it was actually, PFLAG was the first national organization, first LGBT organization, and I don't know about small ones, but the national ones to become trans inclusive, and one of the first to lead the fight with ENDA. So those were interesting times, and some good came out of them.
Okay. And what have you found since? I mean, you've continued to be involved in PFLAG, even though you're no longer on the board. But have you seen those policies? I mean, do you feel they've been successful? And
Definitely, and it's not just PFLAG, but in the society in general as a whole, it's becoming much more accepting. And one of the reasons, I think, is because of people like Ellen DeGeneres and television shows that have featured gay or lesbian or trans characters. First it was just gay men, and then and Ellen, and then what's her name? Courtney Cox, is that her name? On Orange is the New Black, a trans woman, and it's become, people are beginning to realize that we're all just people.
okay.
And PFLAG, I've also seen that when we first started attending PFLAG, there were no out trans people in the local chapter.
Right.
And now there are a lot.
And there really were no parents of trans people in the very beginning, that were coming to PFLAG as a place to get support.
Right.
And offering support to new parents who had just found out that their kids were, or that they thought they might be, or that their fathers or mothers might be. I mean, it's
And
changed.
now, of course, we have a whole support group for parents of trans and gender nonconforming
Right.
people.
Which is amazing. And I know people who go to that and how much it means to have that here.
So you've seen a pretty dramatic evolution, it sounds like, in the long time that you've been involved.
Yeah, but as we were just talking about before the show, Olympia is one of the cool places.
Sure, yeah.
But what happened to Bill happened in a cool place, and
Right.
we know
Yeah.
that there are trans bashings and gay bashings and racism and all of that here. Even though it's one of the better places, that doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of work to do.
Now, I understand that there was the Westboro Baptist Church was involved somehow in what happened to Bill. Is that right?
No,
No.
no. Well, we
Okay.
don't know. The 4 kids who beat him up, who were all
okay.
under 18,
I see.
we don't know what influenced them to think it was okay.
Okay.
So,
But we do know that there were some incidences right before that. There was Colonel Greta Kramermeyer,
Right.
who was the highest ranking military officer to ever be booted out of the Army for being gay.
for answering a question with honesty when she was asked, "Are you a homosexual?" She
Right.
said
So
yes.
she was invited to speak at Olympia High School for a Women's History Month. And there was a big to-do about that. Some local groups complained. They had a huge school board meeting to discuss it. And Gabbi spoke at the school board meeting, and so did our son, Bill, who was...
Yeah, Bill asked me to go, and I was always terrified of public speaking. But I know you'd have a hard time believing that.
You
But
seem to have got over it.
Well, yeah, but Bill asked, and I went, and I just made myself do it. And I realized when I started getting asked to speak after Bill died that people didn't expect me to be a polished professional public speaker.
Right.
They wanted a real person. And so once I figured that out, I just figured I can do that.
But anyway, the school board, or the principal and the teachers at Olympia High School insisted that they wanted to bring Colonel Kramermeyer here, and she came and spoke. And it was very shortly after that that Bill and his friends were assaulted. And the way that happened, it was spring break,
Right.
and Bill and his best friend Sam and Sam's girlfriend,
And this was in what year?
1995.
95.
Right.
And they had gone to rent a video, and were walking back from the video store to Sam's girlfriend's house,
I see.
which took them right past Olympia High School campus.
I see.
So this car full of boys pulled up and started hollering at them, "Hey, are you guys queer? Are you fags?" And they tried to ignore them. They cut across the school campus where they thought they would be safe. But the guys parked their car and came on campus, confronted them, and beat them up. Shortly after that, there was a local rally, just an anti-hate rally, that was pulled together in order to support Bill.
And Sam.
And
And Jenny.
Colonel Kramermeyer spoke at the rally. So did members of the school board and the mayor and a number. It was a huge turnout locally.
And it was at that rally that Alec was asked by the then president of PFLAG, Olympia, to come and speak. And so that was our connection.
So it wasn't Westboro Baptist Church, it was that.
But it was a hate group.
But Westboro Baptist Church did show up shortly after that at a PFLAG conference that we were at.
Okay.
And the keynote speaker at the PFLAG conference was Judy Shepherd, Matthew Shepherd's mother. And they stood outside and protested for the 3 days of the conference. And we
And
just
we
ignored them.
Yeah.
And asked everybody else to just not draw attention to them.
And they also showed up in Olympia a few years after that. And
Yeah.
small group of them at the Capitol, and then they went to Olympia High School. And Olympia High School, the students led a counter protest. It was beautiful. It was. It
You were
wasn't.
there?
No, I don't think I
No?
was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they printed up T-shirts, and on the back it said Olympia Love or Only Love, and they
And
all
that
stood
was
with their
in-
backs to
It
the.
was just a few years ago,
Okay.
maybe 5 years ago or less.
Oh, all right. Okay. Well, Gabby, you're also involved through the Quaker community with the Friends Ugandan Safe Transport Fund.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that came about and what's going on with
Sure.
that now?
There was a point 3 years ago approximately where Uganda's president and leadership were going to pass what was called the Kill the Gays bill. And out of that, there was a lot of discussion nationally and internationally. And I attend the Quaker meeting here in Olympia and have been since 7 years, 5 years, I'm not exactly sure.
Right.
But I'm very active on Facebook, and I became friends with a man who is from Uganda, and he had just gone back to Uganda from 2 years, I believe, of refugee status in Canada. And he was a social worker, and he was gay, and he decided he had to go home and help LGBT people in Uganda because they were terrified. And he helped set up an organization that ran safe houses and helped people, and their goal was to help people who felt like they had to run to get out of the country.
Right.
And at the same time, another Quaker who attends our meeting was talking to another person who is a straight cisgender ally, wasn't even an ally at that time. He was a local quiet leader in a fairly rural part of Uganda. And his family had always been in leadership roles, and he started having LGBT people come to him and say, oh my God, help me, I have to escape, I have to get out. And so he asked this other Quaker, I don't know anything about this, what do I do? And so we started talking in our Peace and Social Justice Committee and decided to ask the meeting if we could form a project that would raise funds to help fund them supporting people out of Uganda.
Okay.
And Quakers are usually not this fast, but they decided immediately, yes, we want to do this. And so we created this project and started raising money, which could go through the Quaker meeting as a nonprofit so people could write off their donations. And we started sending money to Uganda to help fund people out. And that was in 2014, end of 2014, I think, September. And we're still going. We've funded 1,870 LGBT people out of Uganda so far.
Wow.
And all our role is raising the funds. The project is completely run by Ugandans in Uganda. We give them the funds to do the work. And we've just worked with some incredible people.
So I haven't really kept up, but has the political situation changed at all in Uganda since then, or
Well,
is it
the court case, they passed it and then the courts threw it out.
okay?
But before that, there already were laws on the books about homosexuality, and they just include transgender in
Right. Yeah.
just, I don't
Right.
know that they
just lump
specific.
them in with.
They're all
Yeah.
bigoted, they're just,
All
they're
sex and
bigoted
gender
against all of
minorities.
them, and,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
all lumped together as far as I can tell. So they didn't pass, they didn't get to keep the law, but they already had other laws on the books. And a lot of the problem is not always with the law, it's with the fear and the hatred in the community, which mostly has been brought in by American evangelical Christians
Right.
who are missionaries and who go over and have brought their homophobia and their transphobia with them. And not that it wasn't necessarily all brought in, but it certainly has been really supported by that. So
the project is continuing.
the project is continuing. We have a website, friendsugandansafetransport.org, which we try to keep up to date and work with some amazing people. And it feels good. I just talked to a man who's been a supporter from a Quaker meeting in the South today. And he was almost in tears, and he said, I don't know where else I could know that I can save somebody's life with just a little bit of money. So I said, I don't either. I mean, just...
So what does the money actually
The money
get used
pays
for?
for transportation and sometimes for medicine and food, mostly for the actual cost of transporting somebody out,
Okay.
which
Now,
is a
you have a-
combination of paying transport companies or bus companies for fare, and their role, the people we work with, who we call conductors, their role is getting people out of Uganda to the other countries where other people take them and do the next step of finding out, taking them to homes where they can get visas and passports if they need, and figure out what country they can go to. So we just fund this one piece of the work.
Where do they typically go?
There's about 16 countries on our website that we list, and it's everything from the Netherlands to Germany and Canada, not the United States. We won't let them in. The United Arab Emirates.
Okay.
Rwanda, interestingly enough, actually has been, since they did the genocide and either killed off or scared off and ran off all of the people that they could, they've been especially interested in getting educated people, and if they're LGBTQ, they're fine with that. So if they're people who are professionals that have education, they've been pretty supportive and welcoming.
Okay.
Other African countries, like I said, there's a list on our website, and I don't think it's completely up to date. I know that with the number of people we've actually funded is up to date, but some of the other details about how many people that are bisexual or transgender, I know, are way off because we just haven't been able to keep up with that information.
Right. But it's been mostly adults,
Mostly,
children?
yeah. It's been 6 children who were the children of either some straight allies that also had been doing the work that needed to be they needed to get out because they were being targeted, and at least one lesbian woman who had children, and so we funded getting them out as well. So, but otherwise it's all adult.
And you had at one point a breakdown of how much money it takes to get a person out.
Right.
Well, between the 2 different groups that we work with that are in different parts of Uganda, and they don't know each other. They know there's another group that's doing the work, but we intentionally don't have the names or contact information or any information about them, because that way they can't put the other person at risk.
Right.
So with one of them, it costs $185 to fund somebody out of the country. And with the other one, it's been running between $55 and $50. They're in a different part of the country. They have different kinds of border situations.
Right.
But that's what we're
So
looking
that
at.
means
when
if
we're-
someone donates $55, they can save a life.
And the project for right now is limited just to Uganda.
Yes.
Even though I'm sure there are other countries where this sort of thing is going on, and
Yep.
People might.
We do too, but we've got our hands full.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing we don't do is we don't refer people to the conductors, because
Right.
we know that there have been people who've tried to find out who they are that would kill them or hurt them
Right.
or
Yeah.
jail them. And so we've had many people contact us through Facebook or email begging us, please get me out. This is going on. Please help me get out of Uganda. And we have to say we can't do that.
Right.
If you can find them on your own, that's great, but we just can't connect you with the people,
Wow.
which is
So-
hard. I mean,
Yeah. So how exactly would someone in Uganda who wants to get out, how would they go about locating someone who could help them?
Word
Is
of
there-
mouth.
Okay.
That's and 1,870 people have,
Yeah.
you know, so people are
Right.
finding them. And,
Sure.
I mean, the people who've gotten out, we know sometimes have written to friends and say, you know, you need to go to this person.
I see.
So,
Hmm.
I don't know. They find them.
And so the project, I guess, will continue until something in Uganda changes.
Or until
Or-
the people that we're working with stop wanting or stop being able to do the
Right.
work. If we don't have people to support,
Yeah.
you know, we didn't actively look for this. It
Mm-hmm.
came up in ways that we knew and trusted the people. In both situations, we knew people who knew them personally that we already had other kinds of relationships with.
Right.
So,
Okay. So you're also, I believe, involved in some other areas of activism and social change. You co-founded an organization called Families United Against Hate.
yes, I did.
Tell us about how that came
Oh,
about.
well, that's an interesting story. After my son, Bill, died, one of the first things I did as a way of, I had to figure out something to do. And I had a drawing and painting and art background, as well as having published alternative newspapers with Alec for decades. And so Bill and our other son, Noel, had sort of taught us not to be afraid of computers. I know that sounds funny.
Gee,
but
can they teach me that?
this was 1996 when I decided to put up a one-page website on Tripod because it was
Right.
free, with a picture of Bill and a little tiny thing saying, "This is my son Bill, who was bisexual, who was assaulted in a gay bashing and who committed suicide. Please speak out and work to end the hate so this doesn't happen to others."
Right.
And people started finding it. And one of the first people who wrote to me was a man named Steve Shacklin, who
Yeah.
wrote me a letter and said, in 1996, said, "I was searching for information on PFLAG, and your page came up, and I'm a gay man living with AIDS or dying with it, and I come back to your page every day and weep in front of the picture of your beautiful son. And I just wanted you to know that you've touched me, and I'm the son of a missionary Baptist preacher from the South, and I have a diary online, and I invite you to read it," and gave me the URL. So I went to his website, and then I wrote him back, and we became very close friends. And he lucked out and won one of the lotteries for the right kind of protease inhibitor drugs. And he's, 20-something years later, 22 years later, he's alive and doing amazingly well.
Yeah.
And so he was supporting me through some of the toughest stuff. And because of my work with PFLAG and connections with Steve, I met this woman online, Carolyn Wagner, who found my website and wrote to me and said, "My name is Carolyn Wagner. My son was assaulted in a gay bashing here in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and he survived.
Right.
And I just wanted to connect with you." And so we started working together and realized that because of the time that had passed and the work we had done learning about hate crimes and about survival and about working with families, that we didn't want what our work to go to waste when there were so many families and so many victims dealing with hate crimes. So we decided to work together. And one of the first things that happened after that, when we started working as Families United Against Hate, was I had never met Carolyn in person. I had hardly talked to her on the phone. Mostly it was email.
Right.
And one night I got an email from her saying, "Gabbi, William, her son, William and I are going to be on the Ricky Lake show in New York.
Wow.
I know. To talk about what happened to William. And they don't want me to be the only supportive parent on the show, so I told them about you, and they would like you to be on the show too. And if you say yes, the only thing is that the tape's the day after tomorrow, so you'd need to fly to New York City tomorrow. And I walked into the living room and looked at Alec and went, "The Ricky Lake Show?" And told him, and she said, "Call me," and she gave me her phone number. So I talked to her, and I thought, okay, I guess I can do this. And so the next day I flew to New York City and was on the Ricky Lake Show and got to meet Carolyn in person for the first of many times.
Wow.
And that's how we met.
Before you flew to New York, they asked you for the name of the local transport to get you to the airport so they could arrange for ticket
They
for
said
you.
they'll pay everything.
Right. So they called the airporter service, and they said, you know, this is the producer of the Ricky Lake Show, and we need a ticket for Gabbi Clayton. And they laughed at him. He said, "No, you're not in the Ricky
thought
Lake
they were-
Show." And they wouldn't sell her a ticket, and she had to go to someone else.
She finally hung up and called me back and said, "Is there another transport company I can call? Because these people just think I'm pulling their leg and they won't work with me." So I got to the airport.
I bet they're sorry now. Huh?
Yeah. I got to the airport, flew to New York City, got picked up by a stretch limousine and asked the driver if I could sit in the front because I don't know how to do this. And he said, "No, you have to sit back there." So I did. But after the Ricky Lake Show was taped, and the next morning we got taken back to the airport on a shuttle bus. They were done with us, and it was over. But Carolyn died of cancer a few years ago, and she was amazing. And she was the daughter of a sheriff or sheriff's deputy in the South who was a member of the Klan. And when she was 12 years old, she watched her father and some other Klansmen tie a black man to a railroad track and leave him there. And she snuck down after they left and left him there, and she let him go and told him, you know, go.
Run.
Yeah.
And so that was just the kind of person she was. And it was her family that sued the Fayetteville School District for William, saying that William should have been protected, and sued under Title IX with the help of Lambda Legal. And it was the Wagner family that got Title IX to be inclusive of LGBT people.
Wow.
So, and they've paid the price. You know, they were harassed, and it was pretty tough. But they're incredible, and I'm still in touch with her son.
So does Families United Against Hate still exist, or?
On paper, as an organization, yes, we're registered with the Washington State as a nonprofit. We've never applied for 501c3 status, and we don't have a fiscal sponsor.
Right.
We've always paid our own way or had people give to us. PFLAG donated some money at way back at one point when we were doing some work. But we have a very small board, but because Carolyn died and I'm doing a lot of different things, including that, it's basically me doing it on my own and a couple of other people. Ethan St. Pierre, who I don't know if you know, he's a trans man whose transgender aunt was murdered. And I met him through Carolyn Wagner, and he ran a radio show, Trans FM, for many years.
Okay.
And
In Boston.
he's-
I said in Boston.
or Maine, actually.
No, it's not Maine, it's Boston.
Well, he lives in, well, whatever. Ethan, you'll correct me. But he's amazing, and he's on our board and does outreach work like I do, but we're not really a formal organization. We're kind of a loose grassroots thing. We have a website,
Okay.
which is FUA, F-U-A, Families United Against Hate.
So in theory, this is something that people could come and get involved in, you know.
And I still do outreach work.
Okay.
When I hear about hate crimes and I'm able to find a connection to people,
Right.
I still reach out and do support work. The main one that I'm supporting right now is in Olympia, and it was after 2 young African American men were shot,
Right.
Andre and Bryson, by a white police officer. And while it's not classified as a hate crime, I saw it as a bias crime and reached out and have been supporting the family as much as I'm able to. So,
Yeah, that,
and Alec too.
yeah. I understand their trial is going to be
It's going
It's
now.
going on now.
concluding, yeah.
They're
this
in the
summer.
middle of trial. Alec and I've been able to attend some of the pre-trial hearings, but haven't been at the trial itself.
Right.
It's hard because it's Monday through Thursdays,
Yeah.
and they took a 10-day break at one point. But a Quaker friend of ours is videotaping it with the family's blessing.
Right.
So some of it at least will probably be on YouTube.
So other than outreach, Families United, I mean, do you hold
Well, we have
meetings, or do
resources.
you-
We have some resources that I'm pretty proud of on the website that are under the documents part. They're just simple handout kind of things about what it's like to go through a hate crime, what are the emotional responses
Okay.
that you can expect, which helps people feel like, okay, I'm not crazy, this is actually
Right. So your focus is support for victims.
support for victims, not financial, because we don't have
Right,
any money,
but,
but
yeah.
emotional support and
Moral support.
referencing, referral to things like crime victims compensation programs
Right.
and counselors, things like that,
Okay.
as much as we can.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned Steve Shacklin earlier. He's a very talented singer,
Amazing
songwriter,
singer-songwriter.
musician. I know he did at least one benefit concert for Pizza Clatch
Yeah,
for us
actually,
a few years back at Traditions Cafe.
right. He actually came
yeah.
and did 4, I think, benefit concerts for PFLAG, and some of them included Pizza Clatch
Yeah,
with the Righteous Mothers.
yep,
Steve's story is fascinating.
yeah,
He created an online diary, which was the first of its kind when he
Yeah.
was dying of AIDS, and he wrote his own story and a bunch of songs about living with AIDS. And
right, yeah,
his,
Well, actually, his partner,
his partner at the time, his husband now, was a playwright and an actor. So he wrote the book, and they created a musical called The Last Session.
yeah,
And at the time when they created it, Steve said his one hope was that he would live long enough to see it, at least a reading of it in a workshop or something. Well, he did live long enough for that,
we weren't sure he was going to.
right?
I mean, he
But
was in
then it
really bad shape.
Opened
yeah.
off Broadway, off Broadway, had a cult following for a long time, then went to off Broadway, then went to L.A. and Dallas and all over the country.
And London.
And finally in London. So, it was not a mega hit. Most was never on Broadway. A lot of people never heard of it. But
Hasn't
it
been
was,
produced in Olympia yet.
Well,
I'm trying.
maybe one day, yeah.
And then he wrote, I think he called a peace cantata, which had a song in it about our son Bill,
Ah, yes.
and a
another
song
one about
about,
Carolyn's son, William.
and it was performed originally, I think it was on World AIDS Day, by the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. And
Well,
made,
first, it was the first time he ever sang it in public was at a PFLAG National Conference in Columbus, Ohio. Was it Columbus, Ohio?
I don't remember.
or D.C.
Oh.
No, it was Washington.
Well, that wasn't the peace cantata. That was
No,
the first
that
time you
was
sang Bill's song.
Bill's song. He calls it Gabbi song, and I
Yeah.
keep insisting it's his
But the peace cantata was,
World AIDS Day
Yeah.
in San Francisco.
and then it was performed in Miami and New York. So, he's a pretty big star.
Yeah.
Another story about Steve Shacklin is one day I got an email from a woman named Carolyn True, and she said, I work with
George Michael.
George Michael and his partner Kenny
Yeah.
Goss,
Yeah.
and they found Bill's story online, and they had purchased the piano that John Lennon wrote Imagine on at an auction, and they decided that they didn't want it to just sit in a corner and collect dust. So they hired me, and they created this project called the Imagine Piano Peace Project. And they're having me take it around the country to different places where hate crimes have happened and film it or photograph it. And we're going to put out a documentary or a book or something at some point, which actually never happened. But they wanted to know if you would let me bring the piano to your house on the anniversary of the day Bill died.
Wow.
And film it at your house. And so and call me again,
Right.
So I talked to her and I said, okay, would you consider flying my friend Steve Shacklin in to play the piano? Because he's written a song about Bill and he's been very supportive and it would be very cool. And she said, well, I've never heard of him. Can you send me some music and some information? So I did. And she came back and said, yes, if you can get Steve to fly in when we can bring the piano, that would be great. So
Cool.
I called Steve, and he was in Texas with his partner doing a musical. And I said, do you have time to talk? And he said, well, I'm kind of in the middle of some stuff. What's going on? And I said, well, this one contacted me, and she works with George Michael, and he bought John Lennon's piano, and they want to bring the piano to my house on the anniversary of the day Bill died and photograph it. And I told him, okay, but will you fly my friend Steve Shacklin in to play it? And he said, Gabbi, there's a lot of crazy people online. I said, yes, I do know that, but I have checked it out. I have found the pictures on the website, news articles about it being done in other parts of the country. So it's real. And he said, okay, I'll do it if I actually get a paid plane ticket to bring me to Washington. I said, okay, and told
And
him
he
the
did.
dates. And one day I got a call or an email from him, and he said, I got a paid plane ticket, so I'm coming to play. And it was amazing to have him there. And that, he says, was really he'd always been writing the songs, but getting to play John Lennon's piano in my front yard was the inspiration for the peace cantata that he wrote. And so there's YouTubes of Steve playing Imagine and Bill's song and other stuff. So they haven't made the film and they haven't done the book, but
Wow.
it was a pretty
That's
better than Ricky
Yeah.
Lake. I mean,
yeah. You've rubbed elbows with way more glamorous people than me, obviously.
no, I didn't rub elbows. I touched the piano, if that counts. So did Alec, and
Yeah.
it was a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah, I sat down at it and ran my fingers up and down the keys. I can't play a note.
Well, you were a drummer, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
So yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like Bill's story and your story has been a real inspiration to quite a wide-ranging group of people, and
Yeah.
would you say that's kind of affected
a
the?
lot of good has come out of a tragedy,
Yeah.
and a lot of joy. I mean,
Along with the grief,
Yeah.
which is
Sure,
there all
yeah,
the time.
yeah.
And we've just, I tell people it's hard to, it's
Right.
difficult to say it, but we're used to it. We're used to living with that every day. It's
Yeah.
just there, and we go on and do the best we can. But we try to take Bill with us.
Yeah.
So
I mean, does the fact that so much good seems to have come out of that tragedy, does it make it easier? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure, I mean, the grief is still hard to live with.
Yeah.
but-
it does make it easier
it- yeah.
because it feels like at least we're doing something, and because it didn't get us to. I mean, for me,
Right.
I couldn't have lived easily or well. I know people who've lost kids to suicide and to hate crimes, and I've seen how some of them are destroyed by it and can't do anything. And I was raised an activist,
Right.
I was raised by activist parents, and people have said maybe that's why you were able to see that as something, and I don't know. I just, I mean, Alec got invited to speak at PFLAG, and I learned how to do web design, and we just sort of figured out. And our son, Noel, is very proud of us, and that
Yeah.
feels good. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, your work has certainly affected positively a lot of lives,
But
Here
we
at
wouldn't be
Olympia and
here
everywhere
without the
else.
love and support of those same people.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
this could have killed us too. And we have inherited and been loved and held up by an amazing community that we really wouldn't have known. So we don't do it by ourselves, not
Yeah.
even close.
Yeah, yeah.
And because this is tea time, one thing I want to add is that about a year or two ago, I was talking to a friend of Bill's from back then. And I said, is it possible that Bill was transgender and didn't come out? And she said, no, but he was very supportive of a transgender friend at Olympia High School. She said he wasn't trans himself, but he was an ally, and so it just something that I felt like maybe I need to ask,
and we don't know who that transgender friend
No,
was.
we don't.
Be interesting to find out one day.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
but
would
may
be.
never be able to. We're still close friends with Sam, who was beat up with him, who was a straight cisgender friend of
Right,
Bill's that was
right.
assumed to be gay because he was Bill's best friend. And Jenny, who was then Sam's girlfriend, who is, they're both still in Olympia, and we still see them, and they're part of our family.
Right. So, among the people that, your experience has inspired have been a lot of artists, it sounds like. So, Alec, you are yourself an artist. Tell us a little bit about, you had a career as a painter for a
Yeah.
little while, and you are now a novelist.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about your progression through the arts.
Okay.
As,
Well, I majored in painting, got a graduate degree in painting, taught art for a while. Starting in '74, the same year I met Gabbi, I started working for a newspaper. I certainly couldn't make a living as an artist. And for years and years, I went back and forth between writing and painting. I did both. Worked for newspapers. I worked as a full-time reporter for the Ranger newspaper for a while, and then as a freelancer for the Weekly Volcano, and now Arts Olympia, the News Tribune, a little bit for the Olympian. And I always kind of balanced that with the painting.
right.
And gradually over time, the writing became more interesting to me, satisfying to me than painting.
Okay.
I wrote my first novel in 2000, or published it in 2000.
We started it in Mississippi way before
Yeah.
that on an IBM Selectric typewriter.
Oh, wow.
Right. And then
And that was, which novel was
it was
that?
called Until the Dawn.
Oh, okay. All right.
And in 2002, I had open heart surgery.
Ah,
And after that, I didn't have the energy for painting.
right.
The paintings I do or did were very energetic. I did, you know, and it took physically a lot out of me. So as I recuperated from the surgery, I started doing more writing and less painting still, and more and more. And finally quit painting altogether. The last painting I did was, I had an exhibition at the convention center in Seattle, and I had one last painting that I wanted to finish for that show.
Yeah.
And then that was it after
And
that.
that was in 2009.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I haven't painted since then.
And he has a big retrospective show coming up in this summer, this year.
Oh, okay.
At Tacoma Community College.
I know you've written at least one book about art.
Yeah, I've written art reviews, weekly art reviews for the Volcano since about 96 or 97. And I compiled a bunch of those and with some essays on art into a book called As If Art Matters.
And he's waiting
Now,
for me to edit the other book about art, which waiting for me to edit them sometimes takes as long, or if not longer, than writing them.
Yeah. Yeah. But you've written also a number of novels.
Yeah, 8 novels,
Yeah.
and most of them are based on my experiences growing up in the South. They're
Right. Yeah.
set in the South. There are a couple that are set in this area.
Yeah. The first one of your books I read was The Wives of Marty Winters,
Which is set in
Which,
Olympia,
yeah,
partially.
which I read because you brought me a copy when I was in the hospital.
Ah, I didn't
And,
remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do now that you said it.
Yes. Well, it made the experience a hell of a lot less boring. I have
Well,
to tell you.
good. I'm glad I could
Yeah,
contribute to that.
I was really actually very impressed, and so I read your trilogy that is set in Mississippi.
Yeah, on the Gulf
Yeah.
Coast. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he has a murder mystery that's set in a small town somewhere between Seattle and Portland. Fictional small town. And it's
Called Reunion at the Wet Side.
Reunion at the Wet Side. And the Wet Side is a bar that the drag queens are getting killed.
Ah, okay.
And one, oh, never mind. Edit that out. I was getting my books mixed up.
Okay. Well,
The
that's
one
one I
that-
haven't read, but I look forward
The
to
Wives
it.
of Marty Winters has a trans character in it, but
yeah.
I never talk about the trans character because I don't want people to know which character it is until he comes out.
Oh, okay. All right. So, as an out bisexual
Yeah.
person, do you feel that your membership or experience in the GLBTQ community has influenced your art? I mean, I know there are GLBT characters in your
Yeah,
books,
so
but-
it's influenced my writing in that sense that there are GLBT characters. I don't know that it's influenced my painting in any way because most of my painting is non-objective, abstract. Although I did some kind of strange figure paintings with odd hybrid kind of creatures that are ambiguous gender.
Okay. Do you have anything to say to, other GLBTQ artists, maybe particularly younger ones?
Just put it out there.
Okay.
Don't be afraid and don't hold back.
All right.
And expose yourself to a lot of art.
And find some way to make a living besides making art.
Well, yeah. So you've put out another book recently, yes?
Yes, my latest one is called Tupelo, and it has gotten some outstanding reviews. A lot of people say it's the best one of all of them, so, and I think it is.
Is it connected to previous books, or is it?
It is.
Sort of.
Yeah, it's the title is Tupelo. Tupelo is the name of a town where I was born in
Right.
Mississippi.
Yeah.
And the main character, it's his life from birth through the late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And he grows up in a house next door to the main character in my first novel,
Oh, okay.
which was also set in Tupelo.
Who also showed up in 2 of the
Yeah.
trilogy books.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of the same characters show up again.
Ah, okay. Well, I look forward to reading it. Okay. So, is there anything you'd like to say to our viewers? Any, message you'd like to offer, or
Come to PFLAG.
plans? Yeah.
Come to PFLAG.
Okay.
We're really proud of this chapter as having as many LGBT members as we, if not more sometimes, than we have straight parents and allies, cisgender people, which is not all chapters of PFLAG. And we found that out, that not all chapters are as inclusive of the community as, because of wherever they're set and whatever the norms are. In Arkansas and Fayetteville, when Carolyn Wagner
Right.
was working there, she would get so fed up at that time with the chapters that were just parents who got together to cry over having LGB children, and she called them tissue paper chapters.
Okay.
And we don't know if there's still
Yeah.
any of those
Yeah.
around, but PFLAG has come a long way and all over the place, so I
Yeah.
hope not. I hope it's...
And there's one thing I would like to say, and that is decline to sign 1552.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. We had another local activist on to talk about that, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it quite a bit more in the future.
We need to educate people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you both very much.
Thank
Gabbi
you.
and Alec Clayton.
Thank you.
Local
has been fun.
superheroes.
It was fun.
And
Thanks.
it's always wonderful to have you on. So thanks very much. Thank you for joining us on Tea Time. I'm Lucas Miller. Have a good night.